must be lights burning brighter somewhere. Got to be birds flying higher in a sky more blue.
Good morning. Welcome to Right Thinking with Steve Copeland. I'm your host, Steve Copeland, and thank you for tuning in. Let's have a great day. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. It's good to be here with you today, and you know, we're getting so much closer to the Thanksgiving holidays now, and I just got to tell you that that's my all-time favorite day of the year. I mean, I love my birthday, I love Christmas, things like that, sure, but I love Thanksgiving because I claimed Thanksgiving 37 years ago when I had my first house, and it was so wonderful celebrating Thanksgiving in my own house that I said, you know, I'm going to do this every year in my own house for the rest of my life. Well, 37 years worth, and I catch a lot of flack every now and then, but I'm still doing it in my own house because it's just a day of thanks, and there's no gift giving, and it's just a beautiful day. I bring that up today because my guest today, Dave Richards, again, is coming on, and I'm just thankful to have him on the show again. He's one of my closest friends, and he's been supporting Right Thinking Foundations with just wanting it to succeed from the very beginning. We're like partners in it. And so Dave does a wonderful thing, sharing his time with Right Thinking and coming on the show about once a month. And Dave's got some wonderful, wonderful things that he's involved in. A lot of other nonprofits, not just Right Thinking. He's truly a really good person. And so we're gonna bring him on in just a minute, and I'll talk about what today's show is going to be about. But last week I did a solo show, and the subject was recidivism. We can win the fight. And I hope that you've listened to it. If you haven't, please go back. You know, I'm dedicated. Right Thinking Foundation is dedicated to the population that is returning citizens that are going to be coming back out into society. And I really talked about what the real issues are last week and what we need to do. And bottom line is, it's a problem. People that are coming out that have a chance to succeed sometimes don't because they're not received back into communities when they come home. Sometimes they fall back into some of the things that are out there that are the things that they ought to be staying away from. Go back and listen to that show. I would appreciate that. Thank you for that. Well, let me just move on with today's show. Dave is going to be... Dave, are you here with us now?
You got me.
Dave, thanks for coming. What we're going to do today, though, is very wonderful. I've been trying to get Dave to maybe take a few shows and host them without me being on the show, just so I can get some new thoughts coming out that y'all might appreciate him. I say that. I don't really want to give up the microphone, but I think people like Dave more than me, so I'm willing to step aside and let Dave take over. And so what Dave said he wanted to do on this show was do a show that is truly spontaneous. And he didn't tell me what the show was going to be about until we got here to start broadcasting. And so in the early days, I think this might be his 7th show. It's either his 6th or his 7th. Dave has shared some wonderful, wonderful things that a lot of people just aren't paying attention to anymore. Teddy Roosevelt's advice on, Dave, what's the Teddy Roosevelt thing called that's on the website, actually?
Yeah, it's the man in the ring. It's his man in the ring speech. It's not the critic that counts. It's the man who's blah, 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 blah. It's a great Teddy Roosevelt piece. And
he's done is it Benjamin Franklin? You got some stuff that you gave us, the 113 virtues or something?
Yeah, it was his 13 virtues that he did his entire life. And we got to talk about that because that's exactly right.
So what I'm getting at is Dave is a person that we all ought to listen to more because he's got a very good take on the way things ought to be. So today's show is called Desiderata, Desiderata, a positive model to live your life by. Desiderata is by Max Ehrman. And in one of Dave's early shows where we stress the importance of reading, I'm going to repeat that one more time, maybe twice more. How about that? when we stress the importance of reading, learning, a lot of people, reading should not be a forgotten art. It's one way that you can face life and have more success in your life, learn from others, and be able to take a whole lot of shortcuts and avoid a lot of things that you shouldn't have to suffer through if you can learn it, get more educated. I mean, we could do a whole conversation today on is what we're actually doing. So Dave is going to take the lead of the show today, and I'm going to go along with whatever Dave wants. He didn't tell me what the show was going to be till I sat down. And so let's do it, Dave. Have a good time, Dave. Embarrass me.
Thanks, Steve. So a couple of quick kind of introductory comments and thoughts. So I'm going to take off a number of things that Steve just talked about. When you read about people that are successful in life across the board, there's some commonalities, and one is those that learn from those who came ahead do better than those who decide to figure out everything on their own. And so that's one. So people that learn from others. Another is just this notion of repetition. Whether you're a great sports athlete, a musician, a scholar, or whatever, it's about repetition. And so in reading about people that have come before us, like Teddy Roosevelt I'm a big fan of Teddy Roosevelt. Probably Ben Franklin, I think, is one of the great Americans. And Ben Franklin was one of the smartest, probably the greatest scientist in the 1700s was Ben Franklin. And he was so he was a scientist. He was a successful business guy. He was in every founding document and convention there was that formed our country. Ben Franklin was there. And Ben Franklin's entire life, from the time he was, I think he was probably 16, 17, 18 years old, he created a method for him that he practiced his entire life, and it's the 13 virtues. He identified 13 virtues to living a successful life, and each of those 13, you can go on the web and see them and read them, and he had a method around it, and each week he focused on a different virtue. He said, this week I'm focused on abstinence, or whatever the virtue was. And he would then focus on it, and each week he would mark himself down on how he did on all 13, but he would be focusing on that one. And then the next week he would focus on a different one. He did this his entire life. And the idea was that if there's 13 and he focused on them each 1 week, he could go through the cycle, and he would focus 4 weeks a year on every one of those 13 virtues. And he figured that was his way to keep reinforcing, how he was going to, live his life. And George Washington had, I think, identified 114 or 127 or some number himself. And so it's repetition. And very smart. I have to do it the same thing. I have to focus and repeat things over and over so it keeps me on track. And so Desiderata falls in that camp for me. It's not a long piece. It's something written by a guy named Max Ehrmann, who lived in the early part of the 1900s. I think he passed away 1945, 46 in that area. He wrote this maybe in the 30s, and it didn't become and he wrote a number of things, but it didn't really become popular and well known until after his death. I became familiar with it because it hung on my father's wall. Dad had 2 things that hung on his wall right behind his desk. One was Desiderata, and the other was Teddy Roosevelt's The Man in the Ring. And they pretty much, I could see my father tried to live his life in many ways by those teachings and other teachings as well, but they were important to him. So Desiderata is one that I say I look back and read it. I can't say I read it every day, but I'd say once a week, once every other week, I just read it. And if I'm having a tough time, it makes me feel better. And if I'm feeling down on the world, it makes me feel better. If I'm feeling good, it makes me feel better. So I thought what I would do today is Steve and I will read Desiderata. So, and if you're online at the moment, or you want to put this show on hold and go pull it up, it's D-E-S-I, Desi, Derata, D-E-R-A-T-A. In Latin, it means things desired. It was written by a guy named Max Ehrmann, E-H-R-M-A-N-N. And you ought to go read it. But we're going to read it today. I'm going to read a piece. Steve will read a piece, and we'll just go back and forth. It's about a minute or so long, not very long. And then I thought what we would do is I'm going to challenge Steve. Steve is a man who knows lots about the Bible, and so I want Steve to talk a little bit about, and I'll do the same, about how this relates to that, but also how it relates to Right Thinking Foundation tenets. Steve is a man of a million songs, and I think there's a whole bunch of songs that come out of this. Maybe we'll see if Steve will sing a couple songs for us, and we're just going to kind of see where this goes. So that's, maybe it'll go nowhere, but I think Steve's got a lot of insights in this, and we're just going to share stories and thoughts on Desiderata. So what do you think, Steve? Ready to roll?
Oh, yeah, I love it. I think it's, what I'm thinking to get started, though, is, you know, a lot of people think that people like us that are a little older than younger people, that's a polite way to say it, isn't it? A little older than people that are younger than us. Yeah, that some of the things that we reference, you know, like our grandparents used to be the good old days. Well, there's always the good old days as you get older because, you know, life's nicer when you look back and have good memories, of course, when things are, you know, we all know what I'm talking about. But what I'm saying is I grew up reading every single night of my life. I went to bed reading books. I had to get a night light that would attach to the bed type thing, and I loved reading, and that's one of my secrets in life that I learned a lot from reading. I probably read a lot of stuff that influenced me in a certain direction, you know, Mad Magazine and comic books, but a lot of science fiction too. But no, I read biographies of every president, and one of the things I like about you being here with me, Dave, is that you've read a lot too, and a lot of people might think, oh, it's not cool to read, but let me tell you something, it's going to be cool one day when you stay out of trouble and you've made good decisions in your life because of things that you found out by reading, and so please let's just keep reading.
So let me jump on there, Steve, because what I ended up reading more of history and all that as I've gotten older, and I liked it when I was a young person. Don't start with that. Start with what you enjoy. And so if it's Mad Magazine and it's comic books, that's great. I've read all those too. I was a huge fan of Mad Magazine. Learning to read and getting better at reading with something you really enjoy, it just naturally leads someplace. And so if you like cars and you like race cars, go read about Mario Andretti. Go read about great pit crew people. Go read about anything on something you love, because eventually it will take you down to start reading about people that were successful in any walk of life, whether that's business or sports or education or whatever. And as you read more and more about these people that are successful, you'll start seeing these common threads. So I generally pull a lot of historical people into discussions because that's where it's taken me. But I've got friends who can, and my kids can tell you everything about musicians from the 60s and 70s. They know more about musicians in the 60s, 70s, and 80s than I do. They know the music better. They know their stories. They know all of that because it interests them. So yes, reading is the answer because it'll take you down the right paths.
Let me echo that point there. That's beautiful. It just makes me think this is what you want to do today. So I got something that came right to my mind. Willard Model Elementary School is a school that my kids went to, my two oldest kids, Andrew and Lindsay. And I was a volunteer there. I went on over 150 field trips. I have a strong philosophy about education. Education, the number one person responsible for a child's education is the parents. And a lot of people, I don't know that they agree with that anymore, but I certainly believe that. And so when you throw your kids into a school environment, if you're not involved at all in what they're learning and understand what's going on in their life, you might not get the same product as if you get very involved. And so I